Welcome back to Old World Legends, where we focus on growing the community. I'm your host, Mike, and with me, as always, is Evan.
Evan. Nothing special. That's it.
Always special, sir. Always special. But today we got something exciting. We're not only reviewing our first Arcane journal, today we're reviewing the new Cathay. Ooh.
That's very true. However, this is a bit of an odd Arcane Journal because it's the Grand Army list, but an Arcane Journal.
Ooh.
And as far
Yeah.
as I could see, the main thing that connects Arcane Journals to each other is that they're 48 pages long.
For now, but hopefully this is the first of many Grand Army Arcane journals we're going to see coming up.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully in this edition, I don't know what second edition of the game will bring, whether that's big, full proper, hopefully big proper full books. But again, let's hope this is not only the first Grand Army Arcane journal, but the first of many. But let's
Indeed.
let's dive in, sir. What do we got?
So for the part one of this video, we're going to start by talking about the characters and what they kind of look like in the Cathay and Army. And then we're going to, in part two, talk about the units like the core, the special, the mercenaries, and that kind of thing. But this is essentially a Forces of Fantasy good guys list. You can see even from just the list of allies, you've got Dwarves, Empire, Pachonia. So they literally have all of the Forces of Fantasy armies as their potential allies. And then when we talk about the lore, maybe in a third different video, you could see why maybe they have alliances or even rivalries with some of those other good guy races. But what Cathay is at its core is an anti-chaos faction. In particular, if Miao Ying is the general, we're here to stop chaos, and we're kind of Cathayan military world police here to stop chaos from spreading, right?
Yeah, a spoiler, it doesn't work out so well. But anyway, they're doing their best they can for the time being. Characters, first up, what do we have there, Evan?
So really interesting. The first thing I immediately saw was 0 to 1 Cathayan Dragon per 1,000 points.
Hmm.
That made
Don't see that
me
a lot, do you? Right.
immediately afraid because I kind of thought the Cathayan Dragon would be more equivalent to how, like in Wars of Chaos, it says 0 to 1 Chaos Lord or Demon Prince, period. Right? But
Hmm.
this is per 1,000. So when there are eventually more than one, or a build your own Cathayan Dragon, which I kind of hope that there isn't going to be that. We'll get to that. But when there's more than one, you can run two. Ow. That is going to be nuts. But
Yeah.
for now, the only
Well,
option is Miao Ying. She's the Cathayan Dragon.
yeah. So we'll see what comes out. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if there was a generic kit, or perhaps they're already thinking in advance. Right. This is wave one of the Cathay release. There's the potential for a second wave. I don't know whether it's this edition, perhaps, or next edition. But remember, if you look at the patterns we see in 40K, when they've been releasing smaller, more contained new factions, it's been very consistent to see wave one release, wave two release, so forth and so on. So they might be future proofing this. We don't know yet.
All right, then we also have 0 to 1 Shugengan Lord or Lord Magistrate per 1,000 points. Um,
Hmm.
that's interesting. So again, whenever you have an army that has the 0 to 1 caps are two separate groups, that immediately means it's more powerful. Because armies like the High Elves or the Dark Elves, they're wizards and they're in their melee lords. They're in the same 0 to 1 block, whereas this army, they're separate blocks. And as you're going to see
Hmm.
later, the Shugengan Lord is not just a melee character or a wizard, it's both. And so is the Cathayan Dragon. So no matter what, this is an army that could very likely be rocking, multiple high-level wizards, whether they're the dragon or the Shugengan Lord, right?
Yeah, that'll be interesting though. Once we get into talking about the lores
Yeah,
and such, because we definitely know the match play book is coming out at the same time, and we do anticipate most communities out there will be fully embracing it, and they have comp rules or new proposals. There's multiple ways to play in the book, but one of them is talking about restricting it to only one level 3 or 4 per 1,000 points. So again, different communities will play this different ways. I do expect that most communities will fully embrace the match play book, or at least ask for a large portion of the match play book, maybe not the whole thing. And so if you might run into the situation where there's additional comp rules beyond what you just see in the Grand Army. So time will tell to see what
yeah.
communities how they play.
Well, let's say you're very heavily comped. Oh no, you got to take some of these other characters. Well, guess what? The regular Shugengan is also very good. They can be a level 1 or 2 wizard, and they're on a very powerful mount for a very cheap price. If you compare them to like the Captasis, you're going to start crying. Very excited about those guys. So these guys are superstars. They're awesome as your little guys who run around and they can fight in combat. They can cast spells. They kind of do everything, and that's
Hmm.
actually a really interesting place to be. They aren't as strong as a dragon, but they can be very multi-purpose. So we're going to get into that later. Then they have gate masters, gatekeepers, and strategists. These are more of your regular humans. In Cathay and lore and in the rules of the tabletop, only the humans who are descendants of dragons, who are basically dragon-blooded, can use or are taught the magic so far. We all know that in Total War there are the astromancers who can use magic as well, but they're not represented as models yet. So you only have the Shugengan and the Cathayan dragon as your casters, and otherwise you have these kind of regular frontline melee guys who have more like the Jade warrior kind of commanders to bring onto the table.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, let's dive in.
Yeah. So let's scroll down to where they are, and we start with Miao Ying. And I think that first of all, you're going to see there's like 3 pages of rules for her, because one page is just describing that as a Cathayan dragon, all Cathayan dragons can switch back and forth between human and dragon form. Now, why would anyone ever do that, right? Surely the dragon form's better. Well, if you look at the stat line, the human form has 7 wounds, just like the dragon. So that's interesting. And one of the reasons why that's the case is because when you switch back and forth, you do keep the same wound profile. However, each time you switch, you do heal D3 wounds. So you can, during the game, one turn be dragon, one turn be human, next turn be dragon again, and each time you're healing. So slowly chipping away damage on this fine lady is not going to work too well for you. Yeah. In dragon form, you have pretty fast movement while also being able to fly. You've got weapon skill 8. You have the dragon strength of 7. Now, you don't have 10 wounds like a Chaos Lord, but 7 is quite a lot, and you do have the 6 attacks. So generally a very, very strong threat for everything else that is not a Dragon Lord to be able to deal with. However,
its weapon skill 8 is quite high, and also strength 7 is the highest we've seen on a dragon. Not all dragons have strength 7, so that's a pretty rockin' stat line.
Absolutely, and we have the Talons of the Storm, which is its melee attack whether it's in dragon form or not. So that's interesting. And in human form, what's interesting about Miao Ying is that she's the only character who's a wizard who's on foot in this army. So the only way to get like a character to join a big block of Jade warriors or something is to have it be her right now, who's a wizard anyway.
Okay.
Now, while she's a human, she's level 4 wizard, and then she kind of downgrades to a level 2, but she still knows the same number of spells when she's a dragon. So you're just going to have a large number of spells to pick between and then cast at your leisure with only a slight casting debuff while in dragon form. She picks between battle magic, elementals, and high magic, but she also knows the 2 Cathayan lores of magic for the elemental spells, and then she also has access to a storm spell, which is her own magic missile, which is very, very cool.
Very cool.
Well, you kind of can just keep talking about her for quite a while. So, like I was saying, as a dragon, she switches back and forth between human and dragon form, and each time she gets to move, I think it's like 6 inches, and can just move herself right out of combat. So if you are planning on charging her and trying to kill her, well, a lot of the time she can just be like, cool, that was annoying, and then teleport out of combat, heal herself, and then cast spells on you.
That's pretty powerful. Let's scroll down, look at her other special rules. So she's got a 5-up. Is that a armor save or a ward save?
That's a ward save. So they have
save,
chaos armor kind of rule with Celestial Forge armor is basically just I'm a wizard, I can wear armor and still cast, and I got a ward save. So that's what Celestial Forge armor does.
Hatred for chaos, that's powerful.
Yeah, she has hatred versus Warriors, Chaos, and demonic models, and gives it to essentially her entire army. All of the kind of Jade Warrior type soldiers get it.
Okay, pretty powerful. Magic resistance 1, great to have. You went through the elemental stuff as you mentioned before, so that's great. She has stubborn, right?
Yes.
Wrath of Storm. So what are these? Some other things? Rallying Cry. Okay, so she does come with Rallying Cry. So
when she's a human, she can rally people, and guess what? She can transform from a dragon into a human before the Rallying Cry step. So she can kind of switch over to human, teleport somewhere where people need her, then Rallying Cry and try to get everyone to rally, and then start casting spells.
Or that's pretty powerful.
Yeah, or switch over into dragon form and then immediately start flying around.
I mean, flying's always fun.
Yeah.
Pretty standard dragon stuff there. I'm not saying anything different than the normal. Terror, Stomp. Yep, seems like pretty.
Mostly it's the other rules that are kind of what brings her out, as opposed to just this stuff here. For example, we only have D6 stomps, not +1, and only fly 9, not fly 10. So she's slightly weaker than maybe like a star dragon in a sense, but you have so many other things going on, if that makes sense.
Okay. And then disdain for dragon. Let's talk about that. Looks like a leadership test. Usually those are not super effective, but anything spicy in
So
there,
it's
Evan?
not that she's taking a leadership test, it's that if anyone within her command range wants to take a leader or wants to issue a challenge, they must first pass a leadership check. And if they're in a combat engaged with her, it's either at a +1 to the roll, so basically -1, or -2 to
Yeah.
that check. So you basically have, if you try to challenge her with a goblin, champion, he's got -2 leadership check from whatever the heck leadership he's got, which is probably like
Hmm.
4 to pass in
Yeah.
order to challenge her. And otherwise, they just can't challenge, and she gets to smash them all to death.
Yeah, that's pretty spicy. Fairly contextual. I'm not too concerned about how often that will come into play, that aspect of the rule. But I think the more important one there is that her challenges cannot be refused. So that actually, to me, is the most powerful aspect of that rule.
So
Um,
I think I
yeah.
came up with an idea similar to this for challenges because I think that challenging all the time, especially when you're like a random peasant and you're challenging a dragon, is just really silly and it creates a lot of weird situations. The game was obviously designed to have challenging in it as a mechanic to try to limit how good characters are, but it also makes them very hard to kill in other ways where they can use a challenge to keep from getting hurt. Um,
Hmm.
but this disdain of dragons, my favorite way to use it would be if she has high magic and she casts walk between worlds. I want you to not be able to challenge me out when you then charge my invulnerable unit. So that's
Yeah.
cool.
Very cool. Yep. Okay. What else?
So first of all, when she's a wizard, she can discard 2 of her spells for her
Okay.
Lore of Yang or Yin spells, which are amazing signature spells, and you have 6 of them instead of 3 like most races, or 2 for dark elves for some reason. They only get 2. Um,
But it's not a whole lore. You're saying it's just more signature spells.
yeah, so they are only signature spells, Mike, but they're actually, so first of all, you have 6, so that's similar to a whole lore, and
That's a lot.
they're incredible. They're kind of like only slightly weaker versions of the best spells from elementalism, battle of magic, demonology, or other stuff like that. Like they kind of just take the best
Okay.
stuff from that and make little signatures versions of them. Or she
Okay.
can have Storm Dragon's Fury, which I would do every single time because like having your own spell that shoots lightning damage, how do you not have that? Like you just need to bring this every single time. It's a better
Yeah.
wind blast that says it's doing lightning damage. So definitely always take that, I guess.
Yeah. 2d3 strength 5 is very strong. AP -3, that's rare. You don't see a whole bunch of that. It has flaming, not a big deal. Once it's resolved, it must keep ground. So yeah, that is the AP -3 makes that really spicy. Is Wind Blast even 2d3?
Wind
Um,
Blast is D3 plus 1 or 3 or something like that. So it's D3 plus something.
wow.
But it is strength 5
Wow.
and AP 1. So she's got a higher AP on this. And it does make it give ground.
AP, yeah.
And it's higher range than Wind Blast, which is only 15. But the funny part is, Mike, you can have Wind Blast and this spell. And you can just double bap them backwards 4 inches.
You could what's the casting value of Wind Blast? I don't think it's 10 plus though. Um
I think it's 9 plus. So it's and again she's got, if she's
it's
in
off
human
the one.
form, that's level 4. So pretty
Yeah.
decent.
It's very good. This is very good. Yeah. It's very effective.
And once per turn, Cathayan wizards can use get +1 to cast if they're within command range of another Cathayan wizard.
Nice.
Yeah, so you can use that on this when you want to double wind blast somebody. Um,
Hmm.
Now
Okay.
here's a huge one, and this is why I would probably want her as my general every single time, is that she's got Supreme Matriarch of Nan Gao, and this means that basically 0 to 1 unit of Jade Warriors or Jade Lancers can become chosen
Okay.
for 1 point, Mike.
1 point per model, right?
Yes, but they get weapon skill +1 and leadership +1. So that makes them weapon skill 5, leadership 9, and they get a 6-up ward save for 1 point on each of these. And
Yeah,
they're
don't get me wrong. That is a great steal. Just the weapon skill alone is worth it. In terms of the leadership, honestly, going from 9 to 10, don't get me
8 to
wrong.
9.
That's great. Okay, 8 to 9. That's good. It's not massive in terms of game changing. Honestly, in my opinion, just the difference of one and the 6-up. Is that a 6-up ward save? Is that what that is? Um,
Yeah.
or is that just yeah, 6-up ward save? So again, 6-up ward save is great, but we all know from people who've been playing tabletop games or Games Workshop games for a long time, it's really 5-ups is really where it's at, where the math really starts to come into a meaningful swing. 6-up is great. Don't get me wrong; it's better than not having it at all, but it's just not going to come into play that often mathematically. But the 1 point for just the one weapon skill, that's worth it. So don't get me wrong; this is an absolute steal that you can do that, but I also don't want to blow it out of proportions because the 6-up ward save and the leadership isn't as meaningful as the weapon skill. Going from 4 to 5 weapon skill, that's very meaningful.
Yeah, and
That's
there
a
are
pretty
other
big
ways to get
for an
leadership
old world.
9 bubbles in your army as well. That even because again,
Yeah.
one of the funny things about the dragons is that when she's in dragon form, you can't use her inspiring presence. So when she's in human form, you get the LD10 bubble from her. But when she's in dragon
Makes
form,
sense.
they don't get to use that, and you actually have other human characters who can give out leadership bubbles instead that can help supplement that. So
Mhm.
that's interesting. Um,
Yep.
they really wanted to create a character that wasn't universally better in either human or dragon form. There's definitely a reason to be both, which is really really cool. I like that a lot.
That's exciting. Yeah, that's fun. I hope we see more shapeshifters in the future that do things like that. I think it's just really interesting and it creates every turn an interesting choice, and I
Yeah.
love that. I think it's really really exciting. So glad to see that they structured it that way. So don't get me wrong, this is a really cool ability. Uh, the +1 weapon skill I think is the greatest value out of it.
Well, Mike, there's also ways to get either one or two more weapon skill for all of those units from either spells or like rolling on the winds of the Yin and Yang later, you're going to see. So sometimes
Okay.
you can get Jade Warriors that are weapon skill 7.
Ooh, that's spicy. I love that. Well, let's keep going. So that's the Supreme Matriarch. What else we got?
So we also have Wrath of the Storm. So first of all of your
Okay,
Jade Warriors and Lancers in your army, when she's the general, get Hatred, Words, Chaos, and Demons.
cool.
Which, when
I
Warriors of
mean,
Chaos are like one of the best armies in the game that are played quite a lot, that seems like a great thing to have.
well, they are a great army. Don't get me wrong, but they're certainly not dominating events like they used to. So, great thing to have. Again, hatred versus one faction, two technically with demons. It's awesome when it comes up. But you're hanging out with your friends or you're going to an event. It's gonna come up maybe one of your games. It's gonna be rare that it comes up more than
It's
one.
interesting they don't hate Beastmen, but I'm
Yeah,
not
that is
complaining.
interesting. Yeah. Honestly, I think that was a balance choice, not a thematic lore choice, and I think it was a smart balance choice. So, hatred versus anybody is ultra powerful. At least it is reminding everybody only the first round of combat. It is not every round of combat, but still very powerful because rerolls in this game are very rare.
So she also has Talons of the Storm, so that's her weapon, and so it's strength
Okay.
user. So when she's on foot, it's strength 4, and when she's in dragon form, it's strength 7. AP2,
Okay.
armor bane 1. But the big news here is she has magical
Okay.
attacks. So she's a dragon with magical attacks, which is actually pretty rare. So ethereal
Yeah, I
characters who
think
try
is
to,
the
yeah.
Warp Fire is the only other dragon, or does Galrock have
I
magical
think
attacks?
maybe the well, you can put it with a spite. You can get the wood elf dragon to have magical attacks. You have to buy the
You can
thing
have
that
magical.
people don't usually buy.
But it does again, the number of things in the game that magical attacks matters for is very very few. Demons is the biggest one, but again, a lot of the communities have FAQ'd it, and they're certainly in our own errata to make it so magical attacks doesn't shut it off.
So this is massive, Mike, because what happens when Miao Ying is sitting there and she gets charged in the
Yep.
flank by a Green Knight, and then you can just get locked there forever because they have flank, you have close order, you tie, and you're just stuck there for the entire game, which happened to my Dreadlord on Dragon once. And if you have no
Didn't you say
magical
you
attacks
could
at
just
all,
transform and leave the combat?
you can transform him in the combat, or you can just kill him with your strikes first magical attacks. Oh, and yeah, just magical attacks, Mike. So
Yeah, I mean, Green Knight is a good example of if this is a counter to the Green Knight, who has definitely been terrorizing the battlefields of the old world for the last year or so. So yeah, don't get me wrong, great to have, love it.
yeah,
I
and
think
so
Strike
having
First though,
strikes first on this
that's
character,
spicy.
I think is one of the biggest parts about it. That's very exciting.
Yeah, Strike First is huge. So again, that Green Knight charges you, you get to punch it in the face first. That's that's pretty meaningful. Or anything ethereal, right, from Vampire Counts or something else.
Yeah, so pretty normal that you have the strength 4 AP1 breath weapon. However, I think you might use this a lot, in particular because when you transform from human to dragon, you can't charge that turn, but you do get to
Mm,
move a bunch by doing that. So you can move a bunch by transforming and then fly 9 and then breathe fire and magic missile them like 3 times in a row.
okay, so that's a very important way to balance it is you can transform but you can't charge. That is pretty meaningful because there's only so many turns in the game, and being able to not charge is. Don't get me wrong, it's great to just I need to leave this combat. That's huge.
I think the main thing you want her for, though, is as a dragon, is to be durable. And so that's why I'm saying I think you're actually going to use this breath attack a decent amount of times because what you really want to do is move around the table, shut people down, and shoot them with magic. And breathing fire on
Mhm.
them is a pretty decent magic missile that can't be blocked. And when you're pretty mobile, you can actually get within range of using
Yeah.
it pretty easily.
This is a very exciting character. I love the utility. I love the flexibility. I love the scenarios it's going to to generals on the table. It's going to be a ton of fun. Yeah.
Yeah. So here's the special rules I was alluding to earlier. The main one we haven't talked about yet is, well, what happens when they die, right? Well, when they lose a wound, it's lost from both profiles. So technically, when they switch, they keep the same number of wounds. However, when they're reduced to 0 wounds in their dragon form, they immediately revert to human form and get D3 wounds back.
Okay.
So so if you're in dragon form, you can get Monster Slayer hit and then go, nah, I'm good, and then just be a human. And then you can just be a wizard who is a level 4 wizard and run around doing that stuff.
It says specifically when you're reduced to 0 wounds.
Yeah.
And does Monster Slayer say it reduces you to 0 wounds? Or
It does. You lose all of your remaining wounds.
Okay.
So what I'm not sure is, I think that, so if you're in like melee combat, for example, you're still in combat when this happens to you, so you stay in combat with whoever touching. But if you get shot by cannonballs or something like that, you would then switch to human form and then you could just run around, right?
Yep.
Okay. It does say you can't transform back into a dragon for the rest of the game, but again, if you're a human and you're a level 4 wizard and you can hide, then you can just try to hide units and shoot people, and then no points. In fact, Mike, this might throw a massive wrench into how we deal with the number of wounds left on a monster, for example, because is she a monster? Because currently she's a human, right? And if you look at the match play pack, they actually did the whole starting wounds unit strength scoring thing that we did as well. They kind of copy the same thing, but again, it'll have the same problem. What unit type is she?
Yep, that's something definitely for an FAQ for communities to handle if GW doesn't address it, and they might not. I mean, the obvious go-to answer is what's going to be more fun for both players, and is to treat her as a monster for scoring purposes, so it would still count. But again, that warrants further conversation before making that decision. So yeah, really interesting, very powerful character. I do
Yeah.
like that you can't transform back, so at least it's a one-time thing.
Yeah, so you get stuck as a human for a while, but again, if that happens late in the game and you can, or either that or you can just hide behind some of your infantry units, then I don't mind too
Yeah,
much,
to your
right?
point, it's pretty different if that happens versus a shooting attack, in which case hiding is going to be easier. But if you're a wizard and then you get stuck in combat and you come back with 1 to 3 wounds and you're still in combat, you're probably still in trouble.
Sure, sure.
If you're a wizard and you're stuck in combat, you're not casting spells unless you have a combat spell.
I
So,
suppose what might happen
uh,
a lot is you get charged by like a Chaos Lord and Dragon. The Chaos Lord or the Dragon kill Miao Ying in dragon form. Then she turns into a
yep,
human with 3 wounds, who then gets the D6 stomps to the face.
yeah, you're going to be in big. Again, if you die in dragon form to wizard form in melee, you're still in big trouble.
You're right. It's mostly, I think, that if you are in dragon form and you get shot with
Yep,
cannonballs or something of
yep.
that nature, that then you're kind of fine.
Or at least for the moment, assuming they don't have another cannon. Remember, it depends if you're far enough. If you're not next to other units, you're still incredibly vulnerable to shooting at that point in wizard form.
Right.
So, it's a great role to have. It definitely is prevents some feel bad moments. But I also don't want to blow it out of proportions. That you're still going to be in trouble when that happens. The vast majority of the time.
Sure. Yeah, I think the primary thing to think about there is, what does this mean for victory points? What happens if I kill her and she turns into human form with 2 wounds left, and then she runs around and hides? I don't know. Does that mean she's worth 25% of victory points, 50% of victory points? Like I don't even know.
Mhm.
So that'll definitely come up, and then we'll have to decide. But it's interesting to
Yeah,
think
I'll figure
about.
that out.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll figure that out.
So, and she's not even available for physical model collection yet. I think they probably just didn't have the models ready. They wanted to release the rest of the list. I know that painting and preparing these models is going to take quite a long time. So it's good that we get started on everything else. But what is
Yep.
the superstar of the list going to be without her for a while? I think that
Okay.
it seems unanimously decided that the Shugengan Lords are a massive superstar of the list.
Okay. Well, let's dive into that. Let's see why so starting at 220 points and 145, are those two different tiers of the same character? Is
Yeah,
that what we're looking at?
so the Lord is essentially your like Bretonnian Baron or Duke
Okay.
type dude, and then the General is going to be your Paladin type guy. Um,
Is
but
this combined profile with the mount? It's
it
not
is a
an optional
combined
mount. It
profile,
only comes with the mount.
and it only comes with a mount. So this is essentially a mount that gives you 4 wounds, because if they had 3 or 2, and then they got 4 extra from the mount, they would then have the number you see there. So
So is the
it's
mount baked the price into that price point?
yes, that is the baked in price point with a monstrous mount added.
That seems like a good deal.
And they're already level 2 and 1 wizards to start from.
Okay, well, the character weapon skill 6, good, not the best, but still melee character strong. Strength 4, okay, not the strong. So he's not Vampire Chaos Lord, but still better than an elf. T5, that I would expect that from, even kind of mid-sized monster mount. Is the Pegasus though? What's the Duke on the Pegasus? Is he
That
Royal
makes him
Pegasus
toughness
out of 5?
5. Yes.
Okay, so to par with on that. 7 wounds, it's pretty strong.
It's a lot of wounds.
Initiative reasonable, 6 and 5, attacks 4 and 3. Okay, so it's a reasonable melee character. Not Chaos Lord level, but certainly on the stronger side of things.
Yeah, it's
Pretty
very
good.
similar to a Griffin from Empire, except it's somehow a lot cheaper.
Yeah, seems like a bargain. Well, let's see what else does it come with. So 60 by 100 millimeters. So
Yeah.
that's effectively a heavy chariot base. We're looking at that mid-sized monster base. I think the Wyvern's also on that same base size.
Yeah.
For orcs and goblins, right? Hand weapon, iron talons, light armor. Okay, only comes with light armor, so doesn't come with a lot of armor to
You
start with.
can buy heavy, and I mean, again, it's one of those characters where it's like, I'm not sure why you wouldn't ever do that. It's only 4 points.
And they say it breaks the rules that you can wear armor in cast. I'm assuming.
Yeah, because they have Celestial Armor 5 plus as a special rule. So they get to have a 5-up ward save baked in at that price point all the time.
But does it have like the chaos armor where
Yeah,
you
it
can be a
does. Yeah.
wizard and wear
Yeah.
armor? Okay, so they have the same. So this is the second army because vampire counts don't have that out of the gate. So this is only the second army we've seen that has that kind of armor available
Well,
to
and
its character.
I guess the special item that Beastman just got. But yeah, every single wizard in the game either is not allowed to buy armor or has this special rule, except for a vampire character for some reason. I don't
I think it's just
understand.
an oversight. Okay, starts as a level 2 for the Lord, level 1 battle magic elemental. So 4 lores. So
It has the
again,
three best
most
lores in the
people are.
in the game plus high magic.
Yeah, that's exciting. Well, also access to 4 lores versus a lot of characters will only have access to 3,
Yes.
or sometimes 2. So 4 is already pretty good.
Yeah, and then you have to choose whether, like, so basically when you make your muster list, you have to say this is a Lore of Yang, Shugengan, or it's a Lore of Yin, and that locks you into only 3 of the Sig spells to pick from when you're rolling. Whereas Miao Ying just gets to have any and all of any of them.
Okay.
So that's not that big of a deal though, and you'll see why. There are some items even that let you kind of have more flexibility there as we get onto it later. But here's the big sticker price. Your Vampire Lord on an Abyssal Terror. Can he be a level 4 wizard?
No.
No, he's a level 3 at most. And this is a level 4
Mhm.
wizard for 220 plus 60 points is 280 points, and it has 7 wounds on a flying monster. And for some reason, that monster is not a large target. So the whole ranks and ranks upon of poison archers who want to just volley fire into a monster, they don't get to do that versus this thing.
Well, interesting. It's not a large target. Okay,
Yeah,
so here's the
yeah.
benefits. Is he but is he a monster though?
Yeah, it is a monstrous creature, so it's not a
Okay.
skirmisher, it's not a it's
So
not a
that's
Pegasus.
yeah, not skirmishing. That's important.
Yes.
Counter
If it was
charge,
skirmishing,
good.
that would be
Alright,
insane. But it does have counter charge, so as long as it can see you in the front, it can charge after you and have some
that's
impact
cool.
hits.
Counter charge is awesome. Okay, so pretty good. Now, and again, we'll have to look at the lores, right? But a lot of the times is you don't want to be in combat if you are flinging a whole bunch of spells because can't fling your spells again unless because again, you think about it, if you take battle magic, you don't want this guy in combat all the time because you're not going to be casting your other spells you want to be casting. So
Sure.
well, I'm curious what are the combos where you do because that's the problem you have. Is certainly I know with the vampire count, it's like well, or even the chaos wizards, like I want to be casting spells. If I'm in combat, I'm not casting the spells I want to cast unless I specifically craft this character to be a combat wizard. And again, we really, besides like Spectral Doppelganger, which is not reliable at all, we
No.
just haven't seen that be a thing that is really played out on the battlefield. It sounds great. Now, again, I haven't seen the lores yet here. Maybe their signature spells have some things like, of course, I'm definitely going to put this character in combat, but even the Demon Prince, it's the same problem. Like I make a cool Demon Prince with spells and melee. And the problem is, I want to be doing one or the other, and the rule set really doesn't let you excel at both right
Right.
now.
And so this character isn't the best at one or the best at the other, which is what basically every other army in the game does. However, this character is very cheap for being able to just do both of those things. So what you get instead is you get a very cost-effective jack of all trades character who is,
Mhm.
I can do some melee, I can do some magic, I don't care. Which one do you want me to do this game? And they can do either one.
So
And that means this is
what?
the most
Mm.
customizable character I've ever seen, I think.
Well, what does it cost if you made him a level 4? Let's compare him to a demon prince. Look it up.
That's going to be a little sad because it's got more wounds and it's a lot cheaper.
Well, but that's his base 220, and then if you made him a level 4, what does
It's
it cost?
290. Or
290. So it'd be
sorry, yeah,
290.
280, and then you almost always take the heavy armor, and then let's say you took the 6-point sword, so 284,
Okay, 280.
right?
Okay, so demon prince starts at 215. So if I made him then a level 4, it's another 100 points. So it'd be 315. So 280. So yeah, there's a delta of about 30-ish points.
Yeah,
So it is more cost effective than a demon prince. But I just want to point out to all the people out there overreacting, in my opinion. It's not like half the price of a demon prince, and it's very similar in many ways. Also, the demon prince can skirmish. This thing can't.
yeah,
So keep that in mind. Like
yeah.
this is
It's
good. Don't get me wrong. This is good, but it is not game breaking. I'm just not seeing it.
yeah. I think that actually potentially one of the big problems is, what if he's not a wizard? What if I take the regular Shugengan generals and I just give them a couple basic items? Now I've got a really cheap like flying monster guy. Because again, if you make the Shugengan Lord the level 4 and you buy all the items, they do end up being 380,
Really expensive.
400 points. And I think they could
Yeah.
very well be worth that. They're very similar to essentially a
Hmm.
baron on a hippogriff who is also a
Hmm.
wizard. So
Yep.
that sounds like worth it.
Uh, Honestly, I think that the keep don't pump up his magic levels and then focus on making them some more cost effective mid tier
Well,
characters,
remember,
but I'll
Mike,
just
this is your only level
profile.
4 wizard if you don't have the dragon. This is your only wizard if you don't have a dragon. This is it.
Mm,
There's no
right.
there's no
So
there's no
again,
guy on foot who just casts spells and hides in the back. That's not a thing they do.
but again, that's also my point. Like if you're making him a level 4 wizard, like and if you're not getting him into combat, you're actually, in my opinion, wasting a bunch of points because you're spending for a whole bunch of melee profile you're not using. Versus I would save more points by just taking a basic bare bones wizard who's just flinging spells. So if this guy's just flinging spells all game, am I really saving points? So again, I he might be a little bit too points effective, but I think we need to see this on the battlefield,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think, before we really are passing judgment. And I'm not convinced that it's broken in the slightest.
Well, Mike, you might have to wait to be convinced until you see their arcane items and their magic weapons because they
Okay,
get
well,
to have
that's
illusion.
different. We were talking about just his base profile and cost. We weren't talking about the combos yet. We haven't gotten to
Yeah,
combos.
this is a combo king. Okay?
Okay. But
Okay.
basic raw stats and points in terms of you are paying cost effective, but you're paying for a double profile.
Oh,
You might not use both.
and real fast, they do have armored hide 2. So they are a
Oh,
3 plus armor save flat with no items helping them out. That's pretty good.
that's very rare. That you don't see that often at all.
Yeah,
That's
and this
quite
is this is the second monster mounted character that has countercharge. The only other one is the hippogriff guys. So like Empire General and Griffin, anything like that, they don't have countercharge. So this is a dude that does have
good.
countercharge. So when Peg Knights charge him, he says, "Okay, sure, I'm gonna do some impact hits to you, and then you're gonna experience these potential doppelganger if I have rolled it right." So
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
so
Okay.
let's read the other characters. We'll have to go into the items later. But again, they're very exciting and they are kind of a build your own fun toolkit box, right? Okay.
Okay.
We also have gatekeepers and gate masters. Now, these guys are essentially just your melee Jade warrior characters. Now, what's interesting about them, they have higher weapon skill than the Shugengan. Now, that's not going to be a problem, and we'll see why later. But they're a decent little combat guy, and you know what? They're a lot cheaper than the equivalent in Empire, and they do a little bit more as well. So they don't have full plate, and like a regular lance or a great weapon or anything. But I don't know if they necessarily need that because they have some special weapons that are kind of interesting and can be used. Or you can just take magic weapons, or you just bring these guys because hey, like 45-point dude who just sits in my lancer brick and gets some attacks is fine, you know. Okay, and when you see Harmony of Stone and Steel, so if a unit is joined by this character, they can reroll leadership tests when attempting to reform, redirect a charge, or restraint, which means essentially this guy gives the Jade Warriors or Jade Lancer unit that he joins like veteran, because they can reform basically most of the tests that kind of you would often want to be able to do. So he's going to make that unit a decent bit better for a pretty cheap price.
Yep, yep, that makes sense. Okay, cool.
Another cool little wrinkle here is that the Cathayan Warhorse mounted by this character has first charge, but the Lancers do
Oh,
not. So if you want to have first charge on your Lancer unit, you have to bring one of these characters on a character-mounted Warhorse to be able to have that rule.
mm.
So that's an interesting little wrinkle here. And so I think you might often see like a single, gatekeeper on the horse with, basic loadout sitting in the Lancer unit because I don't know, it's only like 60 points to do that. So why not, right?
Okay, yeah, that's cool.
I believe that those are your BSB options as well. I don't know whether you're going to bring a BSB very often, but that is also the guy who can be your little banner bearer. And the miniatures for the Gatekeepers are really, really cool.
So why would you not take a battle stand bearer with this
Maybe
army?
because you love packing all 1,000 points into Shugengan. So
Oh well, that's an option. But again, also keep in mind, right? The match play pack is coming out, and we're
yeah,
talking about capping on character points, and I think a lot of communities are going to be looking at restricting. I know the packet still allows 50% of your characters. I'm not convinced all the events out there. I think we're going to see a lot more character point limit and comps. You're going to see a lot of communities. At least that's my prediction over the next 6 months. I think we're going to see more of that rolling out.
all right, so then we also have the magistrates. Now, this is interesting. We have because again, the gatekeeper and gatemaster, they were like melee characters, but
Hmm.
and I think they had decent leadership or whatever, but they didn't have anything special, and you're never going to make them the general, right? Why would you make them the general? So, what do the magistrates do? Well, they have a special rule that says that as long as they're not fleeing, all units nearby can use their leadership instead of their own. Um, that's really interesting. So they can help, provide. And then look, even the lower level one is leadership 9. So you can bring the little 40-point dude to have a little leadership 9 bubble. I wish I could do that for Empire. That'd be amazing.
Yeah, well, maybe in the future, right? They give
Yeah.
some updates, but that's pretty good.
Yeah, and then so they can, and here's the fun part, the really fun part of these dudes, they can ride the Sky Lantern. So that's even more Sky Lanterns you can bring, and adding a couple wounds to the Sky Lanterns while having a little leadership 9 bubble. Now, there's a special rule in the Sky Lantern that says that their leadership bubble is not 18 inches when they're on the large target Sky Lantern. It's only 12. But again, I'm still on a lantern, which is a big base, so I think that's a big bubble anyway, right?
Yeah, and they're just awesome
Yeah.
in so many ways. Yep, excited to see those hit the table.
And the main little strategy thing they get to do, which is really, really cool, is that when you a friendly unit that's within their command range wins a round of combat, they can choose to fall back instead of pursuing. So you can charge in with Lancers and say, you know what, I don't want to get countercharged or flanked or whatever by somebody else in the next turn. So instead of following up, I'm actually just going to fall back and move away from you and get out of range.
Okay, that's spicy. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so those are your characters. You notice we did not see a level 4 wizard on foot. We did not see an engineer
Mm,
who lets you reroll artillery dice. We didn't see anything like that. So that's it. You've got, your Jade Warrior Captain dudes. You've got your Shugengan. You have the Miao Ying, and you have and these little strategist guys. They all have a really good
mhm,
place in the army, in my opinion. They have plenty of
they
reason to
do.
buy one of each of these. In fact, my little tinfoil hat theory is that Cathay was written and playtested with the idea in mind that you would buy one of each kit that they're releasing and build a viable, interesting 2 to 3,000 point army with those models. Basically, just put them together. Oh, cool! I've
Hmm.
got some fun stuff to do, right?
Yeah, I think that's very valuable. And I think honestly, this is a pattern for not nearly as many characters as you see with the classic armies of fantasy of the past. And I think that's a pattern we're going to see going forward. I think I'd much rather see personally, I do love how we saw in 40K the pattern of more new armies and you don't need 15 different versions, but the models that do exist, the characters that do exist, all have a clear purpose and a role with that armies. So I think they've definitely achieved that here. So I'm excited to see. I think we're going to see more of this going forward. I think this is the start.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that perhaps a few things seem a little bit cheap, but one of the reasons why they do perhaps kind of cost a little bit less than maybe things in other armies is because there is no skirmisher unit. There is no light cavalry unit. There's no unit of war dogs or eagles. There's like there's no chaff here. So this is an army that's built
Yep.
entirely on a couple of bricks with some special
Yep.
characters and special
Yep.
rules out the wazoo, and that's what they do.
Hmm.
That's their thing.
Hmm. Yep.
So let's look at the
Cool.
weapons.
So, well, what do they got? Anything spicy? Is
Amazingly
there going to
spicy,
be
yes.
something that's going to make me not take an ogre blade, Evan?
Yeah, the first. Why don't you just read the profile of the first weapon there, Mike?
The Monkey King's Wisdom. All right, 75 points. Okay, so expensive out of the gate. Combat, yes. Strength. Ooh, strength 10. Okay, well, that's pretty good. As strong as you could possibly be. -4. Ooh, okay. Magical attacks, fine. Multiple wounds, D3. Well, that's kind of critical. Requires two hands. Strike last. Wow. So this is the best two-handed sword in the game. Um, I mean, strike last is not great, but quite frankly, for strength 10 -4 and D3 wounds, wow,
So
that
the
hits hard.
Shugengan Lords have celestial armor, so they don't need to spend any of their points giving themselves a ward save.
Yeah, they don't need the ward save, and you said they had the armored hide or whatever.
Yeah,
So
so they have a 3
effectively,
up,
they
5
have
up base no matter what.
they have basically the equivalent of wearing full plate and a shield already, just with that combo. So do they? And if they have the 5 up ward save, do they really need to improve their armor save from a 3 up to a 2 up?
They
I'm not
actually
convinced that
can't.
they
They
do.
the one thing that's not in this book is an item that says, "Oh, the helmet of Screw Empire. You get +1 to your armor save for no reason." They don't have that item, so that's fine.
Okay. So that is really so basically you do want to spend your points on this is spicy. Yeah, honestly, the ogre I mean, it's possible someone with the ogre blade could kill you before you strike. But if that ogre blade doesn't kill you, this and well, it's strength 10 too. Like you could really being able to wound dragons not on fours, but being able to wound dragons on twos, that's powerful.
And AP4 is a big deal because a lot of things you care about hurting maybe have a 4+, 5+, 3+ armor save, whatever, and you just say, no, you get nothing. And even a 6+ armor save after it's been modified by -2, like from an ogre blade, still have something, right?
Yeah, I mean, four is great, but I do think it is definitely diminishing returns quite significantly. The delta from 1 to 2 is pretty massive. 2 to 3 is still good, but honestly, after 3, you're reducing 3 up, 2 up saves to 5 up saves. Don't get me wrong, going from 5 to 6 does make a delta, but my point is, each pip you go up, it is diminishing returns on that. That being said, can't go wrong. But if you're hitting anything that has that 2 up save and you're hitting it with -4, honestly, you're hitting them. They probably have a ward save, or it's just going to go through already. Yeah,
So, Mike, Shugengan Lords can take illusion,
nice.
so you can doppelgang this thing.
Strike last though.
Yeah, but you have enough wounds that you're going to still be alive by the time you cast it and then murder the crap out of anything you're hitting.
Unless something with the ogre blade, like a vampire lord, speckled doppelganger, is your
Yeah,
first. Remember,
this
you
is
also have to cast
more
that spell, and you
right.
need to not have it dispelled.
This,
Getting a spectral doppelganger is actually quite difficult.
yeah, no, it is. You can use your +1 to cast while another wizard's nearby once per turn on that one spell, so you get the +5.
Mhm.
It's pretty decent.
But if you're
Yeah.
taking a level 4 and then you're +1 and you're taking this weapon, this goes
Yeah.
back to how many points is this character at this point?
Well, so Mike,
A lot.
I've heard stories where this item with Doppelganger killed 7 Iron Guts from an Iron Gut Death Star in one turn, even when they had the regen.
I mean, yes. Don't get me wrong. This is the first weapon I've seen that made me say, okay, maybe this is better than the ogre blade.
Well,
Yep.
let's read the next weapon, Mike, because this one might also be better than Overblade, specifically on this character, because this weapon, the Jade Blade of the Great Fleet, gives you Strength +2, AP2. Now, it doesn't give you multi-wounds, but again, a lot of the characters you fight in this game nowadays have, I ignore multi-wounds.
I wouldn't say a lot of
You have the
characters. I
dwarf
would say,
character, any of the Bretonnian, every
yeah,
single Bretonnian Duke you fight has it, and every single
okay,
dwarf king you
that's
have has it.
2 of 16 armies.
Sure, but it happens.
17 armies now. Now that we have Cathay, 2 of 17 armies. That's not most.
Yeah, sure, fair enough. But you know what it else gives you is the regen 5+, and so having a regen on a character that
Whoa. The blade gives you regen?
yes, because this is an ancient weapon it has regenerative healing powers, apparently.
That's that's a great sword. Yeah. Wow.
So, and
That's
there is no
good.
seed of rebirth in this army, so this is your only way to get some kind of regen or a third save on your Shugengan. So, I think that the aggressive play is the Monkey King's Wisdom, and the more
Yeah.
cautious play is this.
But again, when you think about it, effectively, it's a great weapon that doesn't have strike last, but gives you regen.
Yeah.
So honestly, because again, you could just take a great weapon and
Oh
for
no, you can't, Mike. There's no model in this army that can buy a great weapon.
So you have to go all in to get something like this because you just don't have great weapons. So again, I
Yeah.
just want to put in perspective the profile of the blade
Yeah,
itself,
right.
because it's not multi-wound, it's just a great weapon that doesn't suffer from strike last, which honestly is not that big of a deal if you're flying and you can move this fast. But so you're paying 70 points for a 5-up regen and not striking last. I'm not convinced that that's a good price point, honestly.
Yeah, it definitely depends. Having the
But think
regen
about what
is usually
5-up
really good
regen
for.
costs on.
Yeah, it's usually the best for the shooting. Like having 3
Right.
saves versus cannonballs is what you really want, right?
But what is 5-up regen typically cost you? 35, 40 points at
20
most?
when you're high elves, but that's really busted how good that is.
Right. So my point is, like, you were paying a lot for not strike last in that regen.
So the troll high
mm,
trousers is 40 and everyone buys that.
mhm. Yep.
So I think it's interesting as a
So you're paying
consideration.
30 points for not strike last.
Yeah. Okay, so we also have the Spirit Long the Spear, which is an interesting weapon. So it's kind of like a lance, but again, the Cathay and lances don't give you +2 strength on the charge. So for example, the lancers are only strength 4. So this one's
Oh,
has a bit more AP and magical attacks, but it's kind of just like a lance. It's fine.
it's only 25 points though.
Yeah,
So AP -3. That's pretty good.
yeah.
It's pretty good. Okay.
But you do get to
Yeah.
use the magical attacks part of it even when you're not charging. So that's kind of neat.
Yeah. That's interesting. That's interesting.
Yeah, so I think this is a decent. I think the idea behind that weapon is you give it to your gatekeeper guy who's going in the cavalry unit. He's got like a little weapon.
It's only 25 points. That's
Yeah,
a great thing to give to a hero, right?
yeah. I don't know if you need to do that though, right? And they also have the Sun and Moon blades, which are really weird. So you have extra text 1 requires 2 hands. So it's kind of like a dual wielding sword. And the only thing they do is that if you get killing blowed on a 4+, you parry the killing blow and you don't get killed. But it's only a 4+. So you could buy the weapon, get killing blowed, and still fail to roll. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to see that a lot, if ever.
Yeah.
So that was
That's okay.
it for weapons. So they had one almost auto take, and then they had a second one that was also very good. But I don't think it's undercosted for honestly
Well,
just a
remember,
5-up
the
regen.
Shugengan themselves are a little bit undercosted, so spending maybe 70 points to make them have a pretty decent weapon and be more survivable when they started a bit cheaper, it's like, all right, fair enough, you know.
Yep, it's a good point. Yep, totally fair. Okay.
So we have the Armor of the Warbird. This one's interesting. It's kind of like a flying carpet that's also armor.
So you're not putting that on your Shugengan guys. So who are you putting this on?
A gatekeeper. Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know. Right? Was that it for armor?
No, there's one more. The
No, there's
Shield of
shield.
Mangao next to it. That one's pretty cool. So when they're charged, they improve their armor by 2. So that would be great. But again, remember that Shugengan can't take shields, so they're not buying this.
So okay, I'm not seeing any crazy combos
So the
there.
Gatekeeper BSB, maybe who's on foot, you could buy that and maybe have them have a bit better armor save.
Yeah. Yeah, or just you want to absorb a charge. You put this on your anvil unit, right? In terms
Yeah.
of this is the unit that's going to absorb a charge. So
Yeah, and
that's
you don't
cool,
want
but
the BSB guy to get murdered before his combat res comes
you
into
just
effect, right?
like this the dragon or something or the Pegasus Knights are going to charge. This is the brick I want them to charge, and this is going to increase their odds. So that's really cool. I like that. That's fun.
All right, we have the talisman. We've got the Crystal of Kunlan, gives them a 5+ ward save. Remember, you don't need
Nice.
that on your Shugenga. This would just be on the other dudes. When you roll a 6 on the ward save, every model in base context suffers a strength 3 hit. So I've heard people say that you're going to put this on your strategist who's riding the balloon. And so then when people try to hurt him and you roll the 6 on your ward save, you just start like exploding people who are in base contact because it is a 100 mm square base. So you could be in base contact
Yeah.
with like 6 infantrymen.
I mean, don't get me wrong. If you're in
Pretty
base
funny.
combat with night goblins, this is hilarious.
Yeah.
But it's also 35 points to
It's only 5 more
potentially
points
no
than a
AP.
regular ward save, and this is your only item that gives you the
Yep.
you know.
I think it's just a fun ward save. It's just a fun ward save. Yep.
Yeah. And then the second one is 20 points to get a 4+ ward save against magic missiles, vortex, or assailments. That might even be worth it on Shugengan who already have a 5-up to start with, just to have a bit better save against some pretty dangerous weapons. In particular, I would say magic missiles are a big problem a lot of the time.
It's really contextual
Yeah.
though, but it's only 20 points. It's only 20 points. So
Yeah.
for 20 points, I would totally consider just putting this on
If you're not
the balloon or
taking
something. Yeah.
if you're not taking a 65 to 75 point magic sword, and you're gonna go.
Hmm.
Maybe I'll take the regular baseline weapons that Cathay have, and I'll just try to buy arcane items. And you want to be like a little skirmisher dude, I think that this might be worth it.
Well,
Because if
if
you're
you put it
staying out
on
of
your
combat,
Shugengan Lord, and he's just a wizard Shugengan Lord, right? If he's just I'm just going to cast to stay out of combat,
yeah,
this is something you'd want to put on him.
I think so, and it's only 20 points. All right,
Hmm.
we're gonna cover standards. We're gonna talk about units because again, the standards have to do with which unit they go with. Um,
Yep, yep.
and then enchanted items. So what are we gonna do here? So we have the Maw Shard. If an enemy wizard rolls a double while casting within 18 inches, they miscast. So this is almost Infernal Puppet, except it's 18 instead of 24 inches.
No, well, they miscast. Does the spell still go off, or no? It's saying it becomes a
Well,
miscast.
miscast can sometimes make the spell go off, but only like
That's true.
a quarter of the time,
So
right?
it's one in six chance. 40 points is a lot of points, but ooh, that could be spicy. So it feels appropriate to the points. This could totally ruin someone's day, or it could have literally zero impact on the game you're playing. It's
So
very RNG.
what it matters a lot, Mike, is that there are some armies that are planning on casting 10 to 12 spells a turn, like mortuary cults, right? So
Hmm. Hmm.
I
Hmm.
think that, and again, this is like one of the only magic defense items in this whole book. The only thing holding this back
Hmm.
from being incredibly good is the 18-inch range. So you have to get a little bit closer. But
Yeah, I
you have a
like
lot
that
of
though.
decently
Yeah,
like melee hybrid characters who can, and you don't even have to not be in combat. Like you don't have to be dispelling with that particular guy to have this come into
and
effect.
it's an enchanted item. It's not an arcane item, so you could. That's I think the biggest thing is you
Yeah,
could put this on a hero, have him in that anvil unit, and just kind of put him in the center of the table. I love that it challenges things like mortuary cult. I think that was a great example, Evan. So
yeah. You can put this on your
I
balloon
think this
guy
is
and
really
just fly
interesting.
around and just sit
Yeah,
nearby going, "Hey, I'm a balloon guy. What's up?"
yeah, I think that's really cool, and I love that it's enchanted item, not an arcane item. Um, I um, I think to your point, it actually is less frustrating than the infernal puppet because of both the range and the infernal puppet means you don't get to play. You're just like your spells just won't go off. Versus you're miscasting, so you're rolling on the chart, so you could still have good things happen. So it really creates some RNG. I
Yeah,
actually
this is
think
only
this is more fun to
miscast.
see on the battlefield. Yeah,
Yeah,
this is going to be more fun to see.
Infernal Puppet, the most annoying part about it is how the three dice pick the two lowest means not only you miscast
Yeah,
more, but in particular, it often makes your casting rolls like lower by two. So it
you're
means
just
I get a
right.
level 4 and you get a level 2 wizard on this game, right?
Infernal Puppet is significantly better, in my
Yeah.
opinion, but this is actually, I think, going to be more fun.
Well, what's not fun, Mike, is the next one. Alchemist Mask is for
Oh,
35 points, you have a bound spell, Plague of Rust, that's power level 3.
oh.
That seems like the most
Uh,
auto take item I've ever seen.
mm, at least it's only power level 3.
And remember, Mike,
And
there
I
are
will
like
say,
40-point characters who are just a guy on foot who could buy items.
yeah, but so they'll buy one of this for sure. Yeah, it is. At the same time, if it was power level 2, you're never going to get it off. Um, if you need to be power level 3 to really have a chance of getting it off versus a level 4 wizard that's dispelling you. And even if a level 4 wizard is still going to have the odds of shutting you down with this. So it does feel like an auto take. I am excited to see this, and because it's not on a wizard, you're gonna.
Yeah.
I want to see more utility out of the non-wizard, non-powerhouse characters. This is a
And you're going to
great
see
thing
it
to see on a
in ways
hero,
similar to this, right?
and that's what I want to. That's going to be interesting to see the heroes actually having more impact on the battlefield, where it's not just about those lower level characters.
Well, here's another thing you can do. For 25 points, a character has terror. They can reroll wounds
Eh,
rolls of 1 against demonic or undead, but no one cares about that. We just care about the fact that they have an extremely common item that causes terror. So you could either upgrade your Shugengan to have terror, but I think the more funny part is you have a whole army of lantern riding people, and they all have terror.
well, one of them.
No, these are common, Mike. You can just buy this on every single dude.
Oh well, okay. If you just want to drop a whole bunch of points to give your army terror, go for it.
Yeah.
Honestly, it it's fun. It's cute. I don't think it's going
I
to see a
find it
lot of
really
play
weird
overhead.
though, Mike, how there's like an item that does the exact same thing in different books and it costs different points. Like I think the Cloak of Beards and High Elves is like 35 points and it just gives you terror.
Yep.
It's kind of weird.
Yep. So they're all different. Okay, moving on.
So arcane items is possibly the best items in the book. Um,
Okay, here we go.
or I mean, at the very least, they're a big part of the combo. So first we have Cloak of Pome. This one says, in addition to the randomly generate spells, they know all three from the lore of Yin or Yang, so that you chose. But they can still only cast basically that number of spells per turn, so still 4 per turn if you're level 4 Shugengan Lord. But getting to
That's
know all
powerful.
3 is very good because once you see what those spells are, you're going to be like, oh my.
Well, quite frankly, from any of the, I could think of any faction, vampire counts, chaos, or anything, just saying you have more spells to choose from, even if you can only pick one, because you get a lot of utility variety. It's not that it makes the spells more powerful, it allows you to have the right tool at the right time. That is very powerful. 50 points is pricey, though. It means you're not going to have, you can have one more good thing, but it is gobbling up a lot of points. But that's a good item. Yeah.
Okay. The next one, though, is the Guardian Feng Shi Bo, which is extremely common, which means not only can you buy it on any character, in theory, you could
Okay.
buy more than one of these, and you could buy it in
Okay.
addition to other arcane items. It means any enemy that directs its attack
Okay.
against this wielder has a -1 to hit in close combat.
Yeah, that's a whole bunch of frustrating.
So this is the Shugengan Lord guy, because again, they're the only wizard who could buy items, so it's
But at the
him.
same time, it's arcane, right? So it's going on the wizard. So it's just the Shugengan Lord. So, but
Yeah.
again, if you're doing this, you're not getting your big. It's 35 points intentionally, so you can't have this with one of the powerhouse swords. So are you building a defensive Shugengan Lord, or are you building an offensive one? You can't do both. So
Yeah.
very good. But I'm seeing either you're building a wizard that has defensive things, or you're building a melee guy. Because the thing is, you can't. You said they didn't have great weapons, so you can't take a great weapon and a defensive
Yeah, they
stacking
have
here.
they have some pretty decent regular weapons, I think, but they're not a great weapon though.
I'm just saying that
Yeah.
like these are combos that I would see on other Lord characters that you're clearly there was a lot. Hats off to the design team.
Yeah,
They've
yeah.
thought a lot of this through. You see where they've intentionally priced things and removed combos to avoid some of those problem areas you see in other armies.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting things you can do here, but again, this is kind of this is what the army does. It has these interesting combos specifically, very
Hmm.
tailored to only allow certain things to do this. I do,
Hmm.
however, my question the wisdom of not specifying to us whether or not you can stack these and buy 2 of them to have -2 to hit.
You can't have two arcane items.
You can if they're extremely common.
You can't have two of the same item.
You can have they're extremely common. So,
I see what
Mike,
you're
I can
saying.
buy 3 power scrolls, right?
That's true.
So, you have 100 points to spend. Can you spend 70 points to make yourself -2 to hit?
No, because it says any enemy models that are attack against the owner of a guardian staff. Okay, you could have three. You have a guardian staff that the name is the same.
Well, and I think
Suffers a
that's
-1
a
to hit.
fair interpretation as well. I think that people are going to immediately not do that until someone goes, "Bad llama, don't
Totally
do that."
valid. Totally valid. The players out there who are focused on competitive play and meta play are going to want to stack this, and that the way it could have been phrased a lot stronger to say, of course, we're not letting you stack that. Certainly, that's how we will play it at Old Legends events. We'll see if it's in the FAQ. Very valid point, Evan, that they should. I would like them to formally address this just to shut down those conversations. Yep, I think you make
Well,
an excellent
Mike, you're going to have that
raw
exact same discussion
challenge.
in a moment when you hear what the learned Feng Shi Bo does, because
All
it
right, let's move on.
says,
Okay.
yeah. So the next one says, if the owner of the learned Feng Shi Bo knows one more spell chosen the usual way than their normal for their level of wizardry, these are extremely common. Unlike spell familiar, it does not say limit 1 per wizard. So can I just buy 2 and then I know all 6 spells? So it's an FAQ question, right? It's can you? But
It is.
again, Cathay is kind of supposed to be this techie, complicated combo special rule army because once you see what they actually do on the tabletop, that's their main strength. It's this.
What's
So
the spell familiar cost out of the main
it's
book?
same number of points, 15.
Okay, so it's the stacking is the question.
Yes.
So
Can I buy 2?
that's that's a great
In
question.
particular, Mike, can I buy the 70-point magic sword and 2 of these so that with illusion I get all 6 spells no matter what?
Maybe is my answer.
Yeah.
I don't know. Need to think about it more. I think that's a very great. I think that's a great question. Um, I feel I don't know. They should
Okay.
FAQ it. It's a great question. Need to think about that more.
Okay, so continuing with part 1, we're talking about the lores of magic that they have access to. Now, I think there's been some confusion, including myself, over what's the difference between like lore of primal magic, where we have a lore of magic with 7 individual spells for beastmen to have, or the lore of Yang and the lore of Yin, where they have 3 spells that are signature spells. And like me personally, I get more excited for like the whole individual lore that's unique and
Hmm.
different.
Hmm.
However, I imagine that most people would probably get more use out of signature spells because then they can still take elementalism, battle magic, or illusion. They don't have to, swap to something that potentially is less powerful, right?
Yeah, there are pretty big differences there. I think in terms of flexibility and utility, having more signature spells is definitely more useful because it allows more combinations. Versus if it's the whole lore, you're kind of, well, I'm picking the old lores or the new lores. This allows me to pick the old lores and combine it with new signature stuff. But I think to your point, Evan, the biggest difference is typically signature spells are only three, right? For most factions, but that's not the case here, is it?
Yeah, so as we're going to get to, you do have six in total. If you have an individual, and again, remember, there's only one caster other than Miao Ying. And so the Shugengan have to pick either Lore of Yang or Lore of Yin before the battle starts. And then they know that they can then, scatter one of those spells into their list. Unless they take the 50-point item and lets them know all three. So you are going to have to pick one of these two things. However, I think that there's a lot of play with either of them. So you're going to see as we go into it. But yeah, you do get six signature spell, which is almost as many as Primal Magic or Lord of the Wilds for Beastmen and
Now,
Wood Elves, respectively.
very, very
Yeah.
important question here, Evan. Now, is it the lore of Yin and Yang or the lore of Yang and Yin? Is this like Gork and Mork and or Mork and Gork, or does the order matter here?
Well, it's interesting. So it's always been written Yin and Yang. So Yin comes first. However, they in the book, the printing, we see Yang first. So I think that it's definitely a Gork, and I think that they are secretly orcs, and we
Oh,
have lore.
oh,
This is
ooh!
lore of Gork, lore of Mork type situation going on.
All the orc players just woke up. Like what?
Yeah.
Love it. But that's cool. Okay, so but to your point, it's not like 6 and 6. So it still is following that trend of a signature list is by default three spells. They're still following that pattern. The difference is there's two of them.
Yeah.
So interesting. Now, you said can a character pick both, or you're picking one or the other?
So the only character that knows both of them at the same time at the start of the battle is going to be Miao Ying. So then she then gets
Okay.
to just discard two spells for any of these set, or her own Thunder spell, or her own Chosen Lore of Magic 6. So she's going to have 8 signature spells with which to pick from amongst 2 of the 4 that she rolls for.
That's pretty spicy. That definitely makes her feel more like a special character of
Yeah.
yesteryear. You'd see things like this perhaps on some of the high elf special characters in the past, right? Teclis or on one of the Croak with the Slan, but we haven't really seen that in this edition of the game until now.
Yeah, I think that just if I just spitball here, I would love it if you're gonna end up taking 2 Shugengan Lords as your kind of like your beat stick slash casting support characters. Just put Lore Yin with one and Lore of Yang with the other, so you get a little bit of a mix there. And I don't think that one is clearly better than the other. We're gonna get into the individual spells in just a moment, but it's just a lot of flexibility then. If you super need one of the spells, you've got at least one guy who can then swap into it. So why don't we get into it?
Love
So
love the choices. That's so cool. I
yeah.
just love the flexibility.
In fact, as we get into special rules in part two, you're going to see that some of the special rules, like the winds of magic, will actually affect some of the spells, and in particular affect the effectiveness of Lore of Yang or Lore of Yin spells. Because, like for example, when the winds of magic blow for Lore of Yang, it's going to make these spells better because of the type of spell they are, and then vice versa for Lore of Yin. So first, we have Constellation of the Dragon, and this is a magic missile that's very similar to the Summoning, where we've got Strength 4, AP 0 if you don't roll high enough, and then if you roll high enough, you get DD6 plus 2 Strength 4 hits with AP 1. So again, kind of like the Summoning, where sometimes. So unlike the Summoning, it does depend whether you roll high enough to get the better
Hmm.
result, right? But like
Hmm.
the Summoning, it's a kind of a short range Strength 4 AP 1 hit kind of magic missile. So in a
Hmm.
lot of ways, it's familiar, but at the same time, magic missile stacking is an incredibly effective strategy that we are somehow allowed to use right now. Where your Shugengan could potentially have 2 or 3 magic missiles, right? Something like that, and that's a
Hmm.
lot.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that it's a magic missile with a lower tier and a higher tier. Generally speaking, I think I like seeing more depth to the spells, right? In terms of there's a benefit for being able to cast it higher. So it's not that I need to be a higher level wizard to get this off. It's that if I am a higher level wizard and or I roll really well, I have a benefit to that. So I really love it when they do that with spells.
Yeah, so this is also kind of similar to Blue Fire as well. The next one, Great Bastion, is very similar to Earthen Ramparts. It remains in play. The unit gets a 6-up ward save. If they are charged by anyone and they end in base contact with the front rank, those models that charged you have to take dangerous terrain tests. And it counts
Hmm,
for combat results if they lose wounds from that. And
okay.
then it's, but it also makes the unit not able to march or charge. So
Here, scroll down a little bit so we
yeah,
can see the rest of it.
yeah. So it makes you
Thank
not
you.
able to march or charge. So it's very similar to Earthen Ramparts. It's not a 5-up ward, but it does have potentially some other interesting play here, and it remains in play. So there's kind of good and bad to that, right? You can maybe have a pretty decent brick of Cathay and Jade Warriors, and I mean, if you don't have Miao Ying, for example, getting them some kind of a ward save and then having them do damage to people on the way in. That sounds great. I think this is really cool. It's not super powerful, I think, because it's not a 5-up ward,
It's
something like
not,
that. But
and you can't march and charge with it
yeah,
still, so it feels honestly fairly balanced.
yeah. So you can also just turn this spell off whenever you want to march or charge, because you can turn brains play
Hmm.
spells off at the start of any sub-turn phase. So you're going to say, "Oh no, they're coming. Let's cast this spell," and then I'm going to sit there and I'm going to wait, right? And then we got a little
Hmm.
bit less wounds coming in, and maybe I hurt a couple of your guys on the way in. That's pretty great.
Hmm. Yep,
And
man,
then
I
finally
like
we
it.
have
It's good.
yeah, and then we also have Might of Heaven and Earth, which is another enchantment. Now, this one gives the unit, so it casts on itself. So remember, this means it's basically going to be either Miao Ying or your Shugengan. It's going to be +1 weapon skill and strength and flaming attacks if you get at least a 9 or more. If you get 12 or more, you get weapon skill, strength, and. Oh, you get both, right? Instead of just one.
Hmm. But weapon skill and strength characters to the maximum of 10 and gain the flaming text
Oh
associated
no,
with
it's
the
all
spell
friendly
last.
units within the command range. I'm sorry. Yeah, so if you get 9 or
That's a
more, it's
big
just
difference.
yourself.
Ooh.
And then if you get 12 or more, it's everyone within your command range gets weapon skill and strength and flaming attacks.
Mm-hmm.
So this is kind of like
Oh.
demonic vessel.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah. That's really, I love the bubble that it adds.
Mm-hmm.
+1 strength, +1 weapon skill. That's huge. But it only lasts to the end of the turn, so that's an important caveat. It will not work in your opponent's turn. So still very, very powerful. So
Yeah, right,
again,
right, right.
casting on yourself, it's nice. Honestly, if you're in dragon form, it's really cut mostly wasted because the dragon already had weapon skill 8, right? And already strength 7, so really, really good already. Again, not bad, but
Well,
also
and
only a
some of the
level 2
time you're gonna get
caster in
another
dragon
weapon
form.
skill from the winds. You can do weapon skill 9, and this can make you 10.
Yep. So still cool. I think it's more interesting on the Lord to pump up his strength and weapon skill because his weapon skill was not as high. So I think it's much more valuable there. But
Yeah.
if you can get it off where you get a bubble and you cast it on multiple troops who are that's very, very, very powerful. But
Yeah.
you need a 12 plus to cast it, right? That's not the easiest thing to get a 12,
Yeah,
even if you're a level 4.
that's true. However, could be a very linchpin spell because the Cathayan like frontline troops only have strength 4 at most. So this is the
Mm-hmm.
only way to kind
Mm-hmm.
of bump them up into big boy tier where they
Huge.
can start being
Mm-hmm.
scary. So again, I really really like this one. I find that these spells like I would probably be picking this most of the time, at least one Lore of Yang guy, because there's a lot of reasons why I would want to do any of number of these things. However,
Mm-hmm.
I think Lore of Yin is going to be seen more often because of some of the crazy stuff it lets you do, and it doesn't rely on you also bringing units to support. It just works magic because it has more hexes.
Okay, let's look over there.
So with Lore of Yin, we first have Spirits of Wind and Shadow. This is a hex,
Okay.
range 15. Until your next starter turn subways, the enemy unit gets random movement D6, which they have to use. They can't use their regular movement. So you basically miasmic mirage the enemy unit.
Well,
They can't
the unit
march.
at the start of gets random movement D6 special rule. Does that override their fly?
It does override fly
Does
and
it?
march and so they can only have to go they have to go that distance. You can maybe fly the that number, but if you have a random movement rule, you can only go that far. If you have multiple random movement rolls, distances, you can only use the worst one.
Well, to be fair, it is 10 plus to cast. It is
Yeah.
hex range 15 versus 12. That's good because honestly, if it was 12, you're going to get charged probably anyway. So okay, that's interesting. That could be very, very powerful. But I see, I at least like this version of it because you still can charge or context something to engage it and charge it, right? Versus you just don't get to play it all. And there's still that random factor, right? It's like, well, you might roll a one, oopsie daisy, but you might roll a six, and that, right? So um I think this is a lot more fun and engaging than just you can't charge, period. So I think this is
Yeah.
a much more well-crafted spell.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think you can very often cast this on somebody and then just make sure all of your units are out of 6 inches range of them. But um, yeah, but we'll get back
Well,
to
that
that.
wouldn't remove Swift Stride, would it?
So we get in Mike. So when you're random
What's
movement,
that?
you don't charge. You don't declare a charge. You don't get to roll d6. You just move that
That's
far, and you have
true.
to just hit somebody. So your charge threat
Yeah,
range turns into 6 inches.
yeah.
So if
That's
I
not
cast this
the
on you and
best.
I'm 7 inches away, you have no hope.
No hope, sadness.
And then we'll circle back when we get to special rules. But hey, Mike, what if there was a special rule that made all of your hexes have 3 inch more range?
Ooh, ooh, that's
we'll
spicy.
talk about that later. All right.
Ooh,
And then we have a cursed mirror, another hex. Okay. Range 15, a little bit easier to cast. And this one, uh, so any hit rolls of natural one made by the target enemy unit during shooting or combat, they suffer strength 3 AP1 hit. So if you cast this on a block of like 100 skeleton bowmen, then like I don't know, 7 of them will die if they try to shoot you. That sounds funny. It is kind of it's kind of adorable. I think this is neat. I don't think anyone's ever going to use this, but it seems really cool. Um, and the only reason why I'm saying that is because it's not just they suffer a hit if they like fire an arrow or something. They have to roll a one, and I've cast Curse of Arrow Traction tons of times, and I never roll any ones to hit when I'm shooting when I have that spell up. So probably the same thing will happen. You'll just never roll any ones. All right. Next, we have Ancestral Warriors. We have an Assailment. So again, Mike, you said, hey, what if I want my guy to be like a melee guy? Well, guess what? You can have an
mhm.
Assailant spell as one of your signatures, right? And what does this one do? Cast on 7 or more, the unit that you're engaged with suffers 2d3 strength 2 hits. It's not very much. But if it's 11 or more, they suffer 2d6 strength 4 hits with AP 1 and Armor Bane 2.
Ooh,
So again, that's like doppelganging somebody with like a halberd. That's fine.
a single enemy unit casters engage the combat suffers two. It's casts combat. Okay, so you can do this in combat. Strength two hits with an AP of nothing. Okay, well, seven plus whatever. There's no AP and strength two. If the spell is cast with 11, okay, harder to cast. This suffers 2d6 strength four hits. Good. With
Yeah,
AP one, okay, it's good. Not the best. Armor Bane two. Again, the number of sixes you're going to proc average on 2d6 is seven, so you get one. That will be AP minus three. I mean, good. Um, it's not spectral doppelganger. You still have
but
the
what if you
problem
just
of
have
being
both?
still have you could, but
Yeah,
again, you're still who are you casting it with? So are you spending all the points for level four and then well, giving him a great weapon won't help him when casting this spell. It will be
right.
irrelevant, and you still have to assume the opponent won't dispel it from you. Again, it's fine. You could make a melee folk. There's definitely clearly builds here where you could make your caster wizard going into combat with that character, but I haven't nothing here that makes me go, "Oh, this is significantly so much more powerful than a vampire. This is significantly so much more powerful than a demon prince."
It's
I'm
not
just
so
seeing
much, yeah,
fun,
Mike.
clever versions.
I don't think that Shugengan are more powerful than any of the most powerful characters in the game in one facet at a time. They're not the most powerful caster, they're not the most powerful melee
Yep.
guy. However, they have the capability to do a lot of those things at the same time on the same chassis for like a price point that's similar to things that only do one of those things. So
Yeah,
it's really interesting.
that's fair that the
Yeah.
price point is effective, but as
Yeah.
long as they don't skirmish, I'm okay with it.
Well, maybe
right?
nothing should
I'm
skirmish.
telling you, that makes such a big difference. The
Yeah.
fact that the Demon Prince can 360 skirmish with his fly is, in my opinion, often so much more threat than a character that is only being able to charge in their frontal arc. So
Yeah,
I think that is a big balancing factor people need to take into account with the points cost that it's not skirmishing.
absolutely. I totally agree. I will slightly counter you, and again, maybe this is just hype for Cathay people or whatever, or maybe it's doom and gloom. I don't think it's doom and gloom. All right, but what if I told you that your signature spells were the summoning, Earthen Ramparts, Miasmic Mirage, and Spectral Doppelganger, and you could have those spells in addition to that, so you can have like kind of like have two of those if you have roll both, right?
You know what? I just want to see it on the battlefield. I'm excited for this army to get on the battlefield, and I think the most exciting
Mm-hmm.
thing here is it's going to feel very different, in my opinion,
Yeah,
than what we see out there right now. It's not just here's another army of the same. This
yeah,
army,
definitely
I
not.
love what they're doing with these combos. I love what they're doing with the signature spells. I love what they're doing with the morphing characters back and forth. This is exciting. This feels not just the models are different, but mechanically they're bringing new and more innovative versions of the rules. I'm pumped to see this on the table. I think everybody's going to be.
Yeah, I think this is a super synergistic army that has a lot of
Hmm.
combos. There's not just one obvious thing you have to take. Uh,
Yeah.
there's definitely some armies out there that kind of suffer from this logic of, oh, well, the only thing I can do is take 36 gutter runners and then try to plague rust you.
Yeah, but there's a lot of combos here. That's what I
Yeah,
love about what we're seeing is I'm like, oh, you could pair this with this. Oh, but you could also pair it with this, or you could
yeah.
pair with like I see dozens of combos here, and that's really exciting.
Yeah, and I personally, my personal preference would be to try to make some kind of character who can kind of do it all. I suspect that most people will either have, okay, here's my melee Shugengan. He's got Doppelganger and Ancestral Warriors and a big scary weapon. He's just going to throw a million crunchy attacks at you. And then here's my other guy.
Yeah.
All he's going to do is he's going to have two, three, four magic missiles, and he's just going to like machine gun the absolute universe. And that sounds pretty effective, but you
Mm,
could also just kind of do
yeah,
something in the middle, right?
it could be. I think we're going to see more of that, a melee one and a caster one, and the magic missile one again is great. But the fact that he's not skirmishing feels so much better to me. It's easier to catch him. It's easier to get out of line of sight. It feels like you're playing old world when everything's just not skirmishing. So he has threats, but there are threats that you can hide and do things about because you know where his arc is. So I
Right.
think that's going to be really fun gameplay.
One last thing to point out though is that Spirits, Wind, and Shadow is a hex. Uh, Miao Ying can take two of these spells, so at least one of them can be this one. She gets to transform and move the 6 inches before she casts these, so she can transform, teleport closer to you, and then cast this hex on you, and then move wherever she wants to go. So her effective range with this hex is like 6 inches further than anybody else.
Hmm. Very, very. It's going to be very effective. Yep.
Yeah, so
But
there's a
at the
lot of
same
sneaky
time,
little fun things you do with her that I like that.
yeah, but I love that. But at the same time, if she's doing that transform,
Yeah,
awesome shape shifting stuff and going into human form to get to pull that off, right? Well, she's not punching me in the face as a dragon, right?
yeah,
So there's interesting choice there, and I think that's both interesting. You're just more risk versus reward for you as the caster, but more opportunities for the opposing player. Like, hey, she's in human form right now. Get her now, right? And I think that's really exciting.
yeah, I think so too. Well, that's it for our characters and our kind of spells that they tend to cast. We're going to circle back with part two, where we're going to talk about the rest of the army, including the incredibly powerful balloons, and perhaps we'll also start off with their special rules because wow, Cathay has a lot of universe special rules. Empire is drooling and sad.
All right. Any last closing words for this episode, Evan?
As always, stay legendary.
All right. We'll see you in the next one.